Hi, I'm Natasha Wein from Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and welcome to my Ava Artist Studio Tour. I live with a traumatic brain injury and hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and now I paint with my feet. Due to serious spine injuries, I can't paint very much with my hands anymore, so I adapted my painting practice to accommodate these limitations. I am driven to make art primarily to understand experiences and tell honest stories of grief and joy. I start painting from a place of uncertainty, and as I paint and make associations to the marks and emotions in the pieces, the titles form, and I begin to understand what type of internal conflicts I'm trying to navigate. I work by series, and this collection is driven by questions like, what happens when the body deteriorates in new and unexpected ways before the heart is ready? And how do you live a meaningful life when wounded beyond repair? Feet are like two identical paintbrushes, so in order to create variation in the marks on the paintings, I craft these slip-on shoes from repurposed cardstock. I add a sandal strap so my feet can slip in and out, and I walk over the paintings with them. I don't know how they're being painted while I'm wearing them, but in the end I take off the sandal strap and they end up being finished pieces. I thin gouache to lay down an underpainting, and I thin paint so it can be splattered to add energetic marks. I use water-soluble Inktense pencils, which I grip between my toes. And I taped a paint roller to the end of a broom so I can use it from an upright position. I also like to use meaningful objects in my process. This was the helmet I was wearing that saved my life when I was hit by a car as a pedestrian, and I use it to make marks. Here, the red marks in the center of the painting were used by printing the edge of the helmet against the paper. The foam netting on this shoe was originally wrapped around an Asian pear, and the marks that it leaves remind me of tire tracks. This piece is titled Unspeakable, Unbridgeable, Unrecoverable. Sometimes I wish the driver had killed me, which is about my experience being hit by a car as a pedestrian and having to reckon with irreversible damage to my brain, vision, neck, and sense of identity. This piece feels energetic and disjointed to me. It's titled Stumbling, illegible to myself. After my TBI, the confidence I previously had about my cognition, independence, and social capacity took a significant hit, leaving me to try to piece back together some sort of semblance of a self without all the pieces I had before. This piece is titled In the Middle of It All, Love Arrives. And it's about my experience meeting my partner after my accident and learning to let someone live a version of myself that was vulnerable and that I hadn't quite made legible to myself yet. It's a colorful and energetic piece that juxtaposed the darker paintings I was making at the time. I don't want to lose any more to my illnesses and injuries than I have already been forced to. Learning to tune into connection, peace, and gratitude amidst what can feel like all-consuming pain and illness is a central practice to how I live my life and is genuinely a life-saving practice. I painted this large 70 by 90 inch piece 2 months after my accident when my mom was caring for me. I was almost entirely homebound, I had severe intractable migraine, and I could barely tolerate sound, light, and basic conversation. I was severely isolated because of this. But one night, from a place of desperation, I put on my sunglasses to keep the light dim in my studio, and I painted the landscape of everything that at the time felt completely and utterly out of reach. Freedom, hope, ease, possibility, and connection. Making art has given me a way to navigate tragedy and reinvent myself in the process. While my brain injury symptoms have improved since the accident almost 2 years ago, I still have a very short battery for tolerating lights and noises. I rapidly become cognitively depleted and confused. I experience intractable head pain, and I can barely read anymore. I require frequent rests in low sensory environments, and I rely on my cervical collar to stabilize my upper cervical spine while I sleep and frequently throughout the day. But knowing my story will see the light of day helps me tolerate the isolation and frustration of having to rest in the dark and restrict my activities day in and day out. If These Feet Could Fly is a memorial of what's been lost and a declaration to remain open to life, love, and possibility despite unrecoverable damages. The act of making this work helps me redefine my body on an experiential level. It doesn't just have to be a vessel that's been forcibly made to hold pain and illness. It's also an instrument. One that can make painful things beautiful. One that can still make meaning out of life. One that still loves despite it all. One that can still tell a story, even though that story has to be told slower and with much more frustration and grief. But it still tells a story and it still wants to live, and for that I am grateful.